disappointed in this. Don't understand what the deal is between these network cards and Microsoft, but nobody's watching anyway. 0 viewers at the moment, so it's not like I dropped off and left anybody hanging. All right, so back to what I was talking about here. I was talking about the situation in which a couple in the Cape Town area was arrested when their toddler darted away from them, and the mother went out to pick the child up who was in the beach. And so they were arrested. And now this poor woman is facing potential deportation as a consequence. So as they were saying, the father, Liam, says, we walked on the boardwalk, all wearing masks and keeping proper physical distancing. Teresa wanted to walk ahead to get some time to herself. That's the wife. And then Florence bolted onto the beach. She was about 1.5 meters onto the sand and then sat down. I tried to pick her up, but she started having a bit of a tantrum. Teresa arrived, the mother came back, and we were both taking her off the beach when the police came in full force and escorted us to their vehicles. At the vehicles, the couple tried to plead their case with the police and explain to them what was going on. They said, we were both trying to understand what was happening. The one officer told me over and over again I was stupid because my daughter can die. Well, aside from the stupidity of the police officer, the arrogance, the haughtiness of such a comment, he doesn't know jack about what he's talking about. At this stage, Teresa was breastfeeding to calm his daughter down, but the mother and daughter were ordered into a second police vehicle. So when they arrived at the station, he said there were other police officers there who were not wearing their mask. So the cops, who are arrogant enough to tell these people who are maintaining social distance, wearing face masks, and trying to chase a toddler who's run off on her own so that she's not in harm's way, they go to a police station where the police are not wearing masks. Yet the police are telling these people that they're the ones who are putting people at risk. He says, I was worried about my daughter's health, so we asked if a family member or friend could come down and fetch her. In response, the police said that if anyone came down, they could be charged. So the police solution to the situation with Wuhan coronavirus in Cape Town, Munzenberg area, is to arrest a couple with a toddler, take them to a police station around police who don't bother to wear a protective mask over their face and risk spreading a virus to a toddler. And then anyone who might come down to take the toddler out of harm's way while the police force this couple to have minutes of their life stolen from them as they sit in a police station unwarranted, they threaten those people with arrest. They would prefer to put the toddler's life at risk. What's with these people? What's in their head? Is this a power trip? It's absolute stupidity. And this is just the start, folks. There's several stories here I'm going to mention about overbearing behavior and attitudes of law enforcement. And this comes from a person who's a strong advocate of supporting law enforcement and who has been dismayed by the hatred and disgust that's been displayed towards police in this country for the past decade, which got progressively worse under the Obama administration, which of course spent its years race baiting and dividing America along race lines. And people have grown into the habit of simply dismissing, disregarding, and even attacking police, as we've seen in New York. But that doesn't excuse police behavior just because you become targets from idiots. These people aren't targeting anybody, so there's no reason to take this abuse and put their lives in jeopardy on a power trip. He then says we were in there for anything between 2.5 to 3 hours. We were not given a fine, but ordered to appear again in court on August 6th. The couple were charged with, get this, here you go, I'm not making this up. They were charged with sitting on the beach. Is this V? Do we need to get those masks and cover our face with those masks? Are we living in totalitarian states during the Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic, and hysteria, which is what this is, hysteria? Sitting on a beach, that's a criminal act. Seriously. And for failing to confine to residence. But confined to residence is not the requirement. They're in level 4 for lockdown and they can exercise. So they can be out and about. And they were wearing masks and maintaining social distance. It was the police who violated social distance and jeopardized the health and lives of these people by taking them. Now, this is Teresa Servinkova and her daughter Florence, who's 21 months old. Lovely photograph of the mother and her daughter. These are the people who were arrested for parenting, as opposed to the hundreds of thousands of parents in South Africa and millions in America who don't have the time to be bothered to parent their children. People allow their children in the midst of the Wuhan coronavirus to run around neighborhoods on bicycles, play basketball, kick soccer balls, and practice volleyballs with other kids, not maintaining any social distance and putting everyone at risk. We see that all over the place, in places where even people are behaving under the coronavirus. Yet here we have in South Africa a innocent, law-abiding immigrant, a lawful immigrant to South Africa, who's married to a South African, and her 21-month-old child who breaks away and runs onto the beach. They go to pick the child up and take the child out of harm's way, only to be harassed and bullied by law enforcement, who then arrest them, drag them off to the police station, where the police officers can't be bothered to wear protective masks, which both parents were wearing, and put their toddler's life at risk, and then threaten any family member who comes to the police station to collect the child while they wait, so the child isn't traumatized, with arrest. You gotta wonder what's going on here. Now here's the thing. She's an immigrant to South Africa, so she has legal status to stay there. But if she's charged criminally, of course, she can lose her right to remain in South Africa with her daughter born in South Africa, a South African citizen, and her husband, a South African citizen, a law-abiding citizen, criminalized by an overaggressive and bullying state. And this is happening the world over, particularly in the United States and South Africa. Now, Western Cape Police confirmed the arrest for the alleged contravention of Disaster Management Act regulations, and that they would appear in court. Regulations. So these people, even if they did something wrong, they violated a regulation, not a law. And as a consequence of that, they can be convicted of a crime, and she can be deported. The world is upside down. So let me move on from that and talk about an even more egregious situation. Now, some people take offense to this. Now, I haven't seen many, but some people take offense, and they believe that the person involved was simply seeking attention and was being arrogant, and that's because she ripped up a court citation in front of the cameras to make a point. And so she's been accused of being a grandstander. But let's talk about this. The Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, has called for the immediate release of jailed Dallas salon owner Shelley Luther. For those who don't know, what happened is that Shelley Luther is a hair salon owner in Dallas, Texas, and Governor Abbott has lifted the restrictions so that businesses can return to operations, including hair salons, but they have to operate at a lower capacity, maintain distances, check temperatures, all things that she was doing. But apparently that hasn't gotten effect yet. So she was arrested, taken to court, and she was taken before a judge who told her that she's an idiot, and she had to apologize for being an idiot because she was selfish. She refused politely, and I'll read both statements here. She refused politely, and so he sentenced her to 7 days in jail. So this woman who was at work, abiding by the health regulations put in place by the state of Texas and recommended by the federal government, maintaining those things, she was thrown in jail where her health is now in jeopardy, and she's spending 7 days in jail. By the way, those 7 days go beyond the date that she can reopen her salon because the governor rescinds those requirements to be closed starting tomorrow, and she'll still be in jail. So the Attorney General's call for her release. Shelley Luther, the owner of Salon a la Mode, was sentenced to 7 days in jail on Tuesday after Dallas Judge Eric Moye said she violated orders as the coronavirus pandemic continues. The Attorney General Paxton said he believed the judge is abusing his authority and that her arrest seems like a political stunt. In the full statement, this is what the Attorney General of Texas said. I find it outrageous and out of touch that during this national pandemic, a judge in a county that actually released hardened criminals for fear of contracting COVID-19 would jail a mother for operating her hair salon in an attempt to put food on her family's table. The trial judge did not need to lock up Shelley Luther. His order is a shameful abuse of judicial discretion, what seems like another political stunt in Dallas. He should release Miss Luther immediately. Now, we should point out is that the city of Dallas is controlled by Democrats and the state is controlled by Republicans, and it's a traditionally conservative state and Republican-leaning state. So that element is in this. But nonetheless, I have to agree with the Attorney General of Texas. This is terrible judicial abuse of a citizen. So this county, where Dallas is at, released convicted felons and put them on the street because supposedly they're at risk of COVID-19. Then they arrest a law-abiding citizen, a businesswoman, a mother, a provider, an employer, because she refused to apologize from an arrogant, haughty judge. I'll continue. So the Attorney General said the letter to Moya sent the letter saying that her sentencing was significantly overboard. He mentioned that Abbott's new executive order will allow her to operate business starting on Friday. That would be tomorrow. So Paxton said jailing Luther for 7 days, which overlaps with her being able to operate her business, is unjustifiable. A community that released all those people, some of whom committed serious crimes, can certainly stand to release one more, a mother whose only crime was operating a small business in an effort to feed her children. This is absolutely insane, folks. Absolutely insane. I do not understand what is going on here. So Governor Abbott has joined the Attorney General, and this is what Governor Abbott said about the situation. I joined the Attorney General in disagreeing with the excessive action by the Dallas judge. putting Shelley Luther in jail for 7 days. As I have made clear through prior pronouncements, jailing Texans for non-compliance with executive orders should always be the last available option. Compliance with executive orders during this pandemic is important to ensure public safety. However, surely there are less restrictive means to achieving that goal than jailing a Texas mother. I'd have to agree. Now, Ms. Luther had received a cease and desist letter last week from a Dallas County Judge Clay Jenkins to close her salon, but she publicly ripped it up. She had reopened her salon on April 24th. So what appears to be the case here is that judges took exception to the fact that she did this stunt in which she tore up the cease and desist order, and so she became a target for their abuse, would be the argument that her attorney and many others make. So far, Luther has been fined $3,500 as of Tuesday of this week, so a couple days ago. However, Moya, the judge, said that she would continue to be fined $500 every day it was open until Friday. So she's in jail, and if her salon is open, she's still going to be fined. So this is what Dallas judge said, Judge Moya. If you would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that your own actions were selfish, putting your own interest ahead of those in the community in which you live, Moya said. He said he would consider only giving her a fine if she apologized, acknowledging she was wrong, and agreed to keep her business closed until Friday when the governor's announced all salons may open. Now, this is what Ms. Luther said in response to the judge, and I saw the video of this. For some reason, she was holding a phone out. She was transmitting it over the phone to a lawyer or something like that, or what, but she was holding her phone up to her face when she said this, and she was wearing a mask, of course. This arrogant piece of crap judge was sitting up there wearing a mask, too. At least he got something right. So this is what Ms. Luther said. Ms. Luther said, I have much respect for this court and laws. I've never been in this position before, and it's not someplace I want to be. But I have to disagree with you, sir, when you say I'm selfish because feeding my kids is not selfish. I have hairstylists that are going hungry because they'd rather feed their kids. So, sir, if you think the law is more important than kids getting fed, then please go ahead with your decision, but I'm not going to shut the salon. Well, and with that, his decision was to put her in jail for 7 days, a county that has released violent criminal felon offenders in the interest of protecting their health. Yet a businesswoman, a woman, we want women in business, yes? Isn't that the story all the time? A minority, a woman, although women outnumber men, so not really minorities, but anyway, that's the myth. So a woman, business owner, successful, whose workers are starving so that their own children can eat and they go without meals, opening up her business because the people that work for her are contract employees. They do not qualify or get any of these handouts that go to businesses. She's the business. She just got a little bit of relief money from the government just a few days ago to help her business. But this is after 2 months of this nonsense. So her business got a little bit, but that money is to pay for the overhead for the shop. The people come in and work in her salon get paid based on what they do in the salon. And they're not getting any bailouts as small businesses because they're not. They're just independent contractors. So they're starving. They're hungry. All they've gotten is the useless $1,200 per adult that was sent out by the federal government, which is akin to food stamps at best. This is insane. Absolutely insane. So this woman's been jailed. That's the solution this judge has. And he's arrogant. I saw him and his pissy attitude towards the lady. It's very disgusting. Now, on the bright side for Miss Luther, she no doubt will be a champion of civil libertarians, real civil libertarians, not the Southern Poverty Law Center fictitious clowns who claim to care about civil liberties and only care about racial bifurcation. That's their goal in life. But real civil libertarians, and I'd like to know where the American Civil Liberties Union, or as I frequently call it, the American Criminal Liberties Union, is located at. They only seem to be interested in civil liberties when it's convicted felons that they want to care for. Now, convicted felons do have some civil liberties. And if the ACLU cares about that, that's fine. And they should. But they should care about everybody's civil liberties. Where is the American Civil Liberties Union in the midst of this government overreach, this oppressive, fascistic conduct going on around the world? So Miss Luther's in jail. She's likely to be a hero, or heroine, I should say, for many people in the center and real civil libertarians and people on the right. The good news for her is that someone started a GoFundMe page for her. Now, they hope to raise $250,000, but it's already raised $400,000 for her defense and has been increased to $500,000. That is heartwarming. You know, the internet does have some amazing features to it, and the fact that people can do things like GoFundMe and raise money to help those who need money, particularly for their defense when they've been wronged. So whether you agree with Ms. Luther or not, certainly the judgment of putting her in a prison, the same place that we've released hardened felons from because their health was in danger, so we're going to put a law-abiding citizen in jail and jeopardize her health. You just got to shake your head about that. I know I still am. So speaking of lawyers and abuse and arrogance on the part of state officials, more for you. Now we switch to South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has been urged against becoming hubristic to questions and dealing or dismissing criticism posed by officers of the court. So in a 7-page letter, attorney Tracy Lomax questioned Ramaphosa's willingness to transparently respond to questions around the constitutionality of the National Command, this council they've got, the body leading the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic. She said that, I regret that I must now urge you not to become hubristic. Hubris. Do not dismiss us. Do not condescend to us. Take us into your confidence. Not only are we entitled to it, we deserve it. We have earned it. Well, I have to agree with the attorney there, Ms. Lomax. Absolutely. This is not just something that you see in South Africa, but you see it all over the place in which government officials are making decisions and people are beginning to question the legitimacy of these, the constitutionality of them, the appropriateness of these measures. It is a bit disturbing across the board as we see this. Right. So shifting now to a little bit of news coming from Natalie Villoyan, who had this in the People's Post. She said the pandemic has brought the world to its knees. I disagree. The pandemic has not brought the world to its knees. I've given you the statistics. We've had 250,000 plus people attributed to dying to this over the course of 5 months. Malaria, 620,000 a year. Suicides, 800,000 a year. HIV, 900,000 a year. Deaths around the world. Coronavirus, 270,000 thus far in 5 months. The coronavirus has not brought the world to its knees. The overreaction, the hysteria, and the mistakes made by governments around the world is what's brought the world to its knees, not coronavirus. The actions of governments is what has brought us to our knees. So she says that the South African Reserve Bank on this week, back in April, they had estimated 370,000 jobs will be lost this year. I suspect that number is going to be far higher than that. I wouldn't be surprised to see 500,000 to 750,000 jobs potentially lost in South Africa. If you include the informal sector, we'd be talking well over 2 million jobs lost. Now, some of those will come back, but some may be gone forever. It will take years, if not decades, for South Africa to recover from this disaster. Very distressing. Small and medium micro enterprises, the SMME in South Africa account for 1.5 million jobs in the formal sector. In the informal sector, we're talking another 1.2 to 1.5 to 2 million jobs, depending on who's telling you where those jobs are coming from. Right, so let's shift to Zimbabwe and talk a little more about hubris and sense of humor that apparently isn't too humorous, according to authorities in Zimbabwe. So we have another situation in which someone has been arrested for their attempt to be humorous. And this is a post that apparently appeared in WhatsApp. And I think the article is confusing two different things because I've seen this previously over a week ago. But someone posted something on WhatsApp in which they compared Cyril Ramaphosa to President Mnangagwa in Zimbabwe, and then they were arrested for it. And the article says, this is from Sikubile Tesa, and Sikubile Tesa says that while this was meant to lighten up social media streets, the authorities have found the jokes distasteful, hence it is now a criminal offense to compare Mnangagwa to Ramaphosa. That itself is interesting. So as previously reported, an unfortunate man, this is the second case, is currently languishing on remand in prison, facing a 20-year jail term for spreading fake news about the first lockdown extension. Now, in that case, the person had announced that Mnangagwa was going to extend the lockdown. So they arrested this person for fake news. Well, the problem with that is that the lockdown was extended for a further 14 days at a later date. So it became truth. So got arrested for fake news and facing potentially 20 years in jail. Now, before I start talking about some other news here, let me just run through a couple issues here. There's a few people watching right now, so hopefully others will tune in after this is finished, the live stream. But the government of fake news. South Africa famously intentionally pointed out that the spreading of fake news would be a crime and people would be prosecuted for it at the beginning of the lockdown in South Africa. Okay, appreciate that. So if you're intentionally spreading malicious information, that's fair. But the problem with government proclamations on fake news is that governments declare whatever they want to be fake news. So let me point out some fake news to you from the World Health Organization, from the Centers for Disease Control, from South African government, from Washington, D.C., from governors around the United States, particularly Andrew Cuomo in New York and others. Here's some fake news that we've been told since January about COVID-19. This virus has a fatality rate of 3.4%. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And even the data, when they spread this news, didn't support that. The data now clearly makes it obvious that that rate is far lower. When you take into account those who are asymptomatic or barely sick and never seek treatment and never get tested, who are exposed and get COVID-19, the fatality rate now is appearing to be around 0.1%, a tiny margin over what we were told it was supposed to be. So there's some fake news for you right there. Have we seen governments come out and repeatedly tell us now that the actual fatality rate is less than 1% and around 0.1% of 1%? No, we haven't. Why? So fake news from governments and the World Health Organization. Masks are useless. The mask will not protect you or anyone else. Really? Now people are getting arrested for not wearing masks in South Africa and here in the States, being arrested for not wearing a mask when the government told us not to get masks. And so when the government was telling us not to buy masks, what was happening? Well, the Chinese were buying up all the masks and stockpiling them. And American businesses were shipping masks and protective equipment to China while our government was telling us not to wear these things. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I was one of the people back in January and early February who said that the mask is not particularly effective and it's not something that we should be buying. My reasoning behind that was that if you maintain the social distance, you're not going to come in contact with airborne virus that's going to get you infected. So follow the social distance guidelines and you won't need the mask. And at the time I said if you work in close proximity to somebody you don't have an option, then a mask is a viable option. But the big reason I said that is because there was a shortage of masks already by early February. And masks were needed by first responders, EMTs who respond to accidents and have to have the mask, doctors, nurses, law enforcement officials, those who come in contact with those who may have the virus in direct personal contact. And so my argument was less about the efficacy of protecting you and more about protecting our first responders when there was a shortage of masks. So, and that's the interest of full disclosure. I'm always upfront about what I said. So I did say that you don't need masks, but not because masks don't work, but because masks were needed by others and their efficacy is not particularly that valuable. But more fake news by governments. Masks don't work, and now they're arresting people for not wearing a mask. So who's spreading the fake news here? Citizens? Social media? Yeah, there's some of that. But governments are spreading the fake news. All right, so the World Health Organization famously told us in late January that the virus can't be transmitted human to human after their overseers in Beijing told them that was the case, and they simply bought it hook, line, and sinker. Can't be transmitted human to human. Really? Well, then how's it getting around? Mosquitoes? No. All right, so there's more fake news from government authorities. You can't spread the virus to your pets. This is what they were telling us until about 2 weeks ago. Now we're being told around the world that our pets can get this from us. I've been told that tigers and zoos have been infected. I don't know how true that is, but that's a news report. So now we're being told that you can't take your pets out because your pets can get the virus. Your dog can catch this from you. But you told us they couldn't. How about you should have said the truth you don't know, you haven't tested, and that wise advice might be to keep your pets isolated like you're isolated and not be around other animals and not around other people. So more fake news. We were also told repeatedly, at least here in the States, and I heard in South Africa, that we need to flatten the curve. Flatten the curve. They're making us all feel like idiots by telling us about, you've never heard this phrase before. Well, some of us actually have heard this phrase before, you arrogant, haughty government officials. We're not all Neanderthals that live in caves and know nothing about infectious disease. Some of us actually know something about it. So flatten the curve, the intent was to keep the rise in cases from peaking at a point going beyond the capacity of medical facilities to treat people who are sick and injured in normal circumstances and those who've got the virus who need hospitalization. So you want to flatten it so that you plateau and do not increase the cases so that you can control the medical situation. We were told that once the curve has been flattened that the lockdowns would be lifted. Well, we flattened the curve here in America. We're still in lockdown. Some places are being lifted out, but in this county with virtually no infections, we're still under lockdown. So there's more fake news, or was it simply a lie by government? Hydroxychloroquine does not work. It's a dangerous drug that requires administration in hospital. Well, that's just horse manure, absolute horse manure. It's an anti-malarial drug which is used for a couple of other afflictions, and it's been used successfully for over 5 decades. I've used it over the course of 3 decades living and working in Africa, and I've never had any ill effects from it. It's difficult on your liver, but if you're a healthy person, that's not going to be an issue. And if you're not taking it for 20 years straight, a long term. So hydroxychloroquine requires hospitalization or issuance in a hospital. That's utter nonsense. That's media hysteria and lies from government officials. Even the CDC repeated this nonsense. That's nonsense. This is a prescription drug. The fact that some morons in Arizona ate fish tank cleaner for koi ponds. Anyway, so fake news. For the fatality rate at 3.4%, masks are useless. It can't be transmitted human to human, can't spread it to your pets, flatten the curve, and the lockdowns will end, and hydroxychloroquine does not work. When in fact, the French study that first brought this to our attention and multiple studies since then are now reporting that in the early stages of infection with COVID-19, hydroxychloroquine in combination, I guess I'm not an expert on this, so I'm not going to pass it, but I can talk about hydroxychloroquine, but in combination with zinc and azithromycin, Zithromax has an effect on mitigating the disease. And we have lots of anecdotal experience from people who had COVID-19 and have recovered. However, apparently in the late stages of it is not particularly helpful. But then the same thing, all the hysteria over needing ventilators, we're finding out that nearly everyone who goes on a ventilator dies. It's almost too late for people when they go on a ventilator. So if you go on a ventilator, it's very bad news. So who's spreading the fake news here, ladies and gentlemen? Is it social media? Is it private citizens? Or is it our own governments that are doing it? At some point, you have to wonder if you can even trust anything these governments are telling us. And that's where some of us find ourselves now. So there you have it. A little bit about fake news and what's going on around the world from these governments. So shifting a little bit to Botswana. Botswana is taking a look at lifting its lockdown levels starting on May 8th. So that's just tomorrow on Friday, May 8th. From then through the 20th of May, they intend to lift measures. There was a meeting in Parliament today. I don't know the results of that. Not seen it. Well, not today, but on Wednesday. So I haven't seen any results of that report in the news yet. But they were going to look at rescinding some of the requirements under lockdown. Now, this would include that between May 8th and midnight on the 20th, businesses, including schools, may operate if they satisfy Health Services Director that they're able to check the temperatures of everyone accessing their premises and prevent those with a temperature of 37.4 degrees Celsius and above. Ostensibly, that's someone who has a flu or a fever or something, whether it's COVID-19 or influenza or something else. No, not a bad health measure. Businesses and schools are also required to show the director that they're able to regularly disinfect their premises and close when a coronavirus case is suspected. Well, shouldn't these businesses and schools already be cleaning and disinfecting their environment on a normal daily basis to begin with? That's, if they're not, I'd worry it. So the wearing of mask remains mandatory throughout the period until further notice. Also, the president is proposing between the 8th of May and the 20th that restrictions on the movement of people traveling between villages, towns, and cities, districts be relaxed to allow those attending funerals of immediate family members and those leaving homes to access farms, Massimo and Mareka, to let them move about. So it will require a permit issued by the government, so the government controlling your movement, controlling where you can move and when you can move. And those in immediate family are defined as a spouse, son, daughter, sibling, or parent. Yeah, okay. So the new amendments also propose dividing the country into 9 zones. So Botswana will now be divided into 9 zones, and you'll have to have a permit to go from one zone to another. I don't know about you, but this feels an awful lot like past laws in South Africa during apartheid. These conditions include businesses, places of worship, and funeral hosts maintaining registers containing personnel contact details. Well, now that's truly Orwellian disturbing. So they're going to require businesses, places of worship, and funeral hosts to maintain registers of personnel data for people visiting there. So the government is going to monitor your movements. Now, we're not talking about contact tracing for somebody who's become infected and trying to figure out who they had contact with. The government is talking about tracing everybody's movements. If this doesn't make you nervous, then you must like big government and the surveillance state. But to me, this is simply the surveillance state. And additionally, from May 21st, restaurants and takeaways will also be allowed to operate from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. compared to the current schedule, which is 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Woo, an extra 2 hours. Thank you so much, Habarone. Yeah, the sale of liquor and cigarettes for now remains restricted. Well, there you go. So no alcohol, no cigarettes for people in Botswana. Anyway, speaking of alcohol and cigarettes, well, at least cigarettes, going to talk about that a little bit here now too in South Africa as I shift commentary. So last week I did a video, or it was a little over a week ago, when the lockdown was extended. There had been a ban on the transportation of alcohol in South Africa in order to ban the sale of alcohol, so they banned the transport of it. The South African wine industry had done urgent appeal and that ban was lifted. An exemption was made for them to continue to allow them to ship wine to port to export out of the country. But when the ban was extended, the restrictions were extended for the lockdown, that ban was re-implemented, and it jeopardized South Africa's wine industry. I did a video about that, talking about the impact on the wine industry. Well, that has since been lifted. So Siobhan Thompson, who's the CEO of Wines of South Africa, was interviewed talking about the wine industry. And she said one of the challenges is that under the lockdown, the wine industry had not been producing wine. So people had not been bottling the wine, and not all the vineyards. So those who had stock on hand could ship the wine. Others had to gear up to start pressing grapes, picking grapes, whatever process needed, labeling bottles, bottling the wine, that sort of thing. So the thing is that for South African wines is that with the Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19 crisis around the planet, and lockdowns taking place and fears about sales of alcohol being banned, an awful lot of people had made a run on wine in shops around the world. And so consequently, a lot of South African wines were sold out and the shelves are bare. The shelf space normally reserved for South African wines in supermarkets, package stores, and such. So the challenge with this is that any disruption in the supply chain of shipping wine out of South Africa or producing wine has a knock-on effect. So for instance, Siobhan Thompson mentioned that in order to get wine from South Africa to Europe in the stores, it takes 22 days. But for Vancouver, on the west side of Canada, because of transportation, that takes 50 days. So you can get a gap of up to 2 months to restock shelves in the circumstances. But because shelves have been bare, and because the disruption in the production of wine already in South Africa is a consequence of COVID-19, you could be talking about 2 to 3 years before South African vineyards and wine distributors get back the shelf space they had in stores around the world. That could be potentially disturbing and very disruptive for the future of the wine industry in South Africa. We shall see. So that's a little bit about alcohol in South Africa. Now switching to cigarettes. For the smokers, this is near and dear to their hearts. British American Tobacco last weekend had threatened Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, minister, who said that the cigarette ban would continue despite the fact that it was supposed to be lifted under level 4, which is what South Africa is currently experiencing, level 4. She reimposed the ban. And so when she did that, British American Tobacco threatened to take her to court, thinking that perhaps they could make her budge. Well, British American Tobacco backed down on Monday and did not file a court case, and said they would talk to the government about this. Well, that's disturbing, because British American Tobacco is a powerful company and has a great deal of influence and employs a lot of people and generates a lot of tax revenue for the South African government. And when they surrender to the government like this after making such a bold claim, it is a bit disturbing. Nonetheless, the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association, or FITA, the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association, FITA, has picked up the ball and run with it. They are taking the government to court. On Monday, they filed a case on behalf of the 6 companies who are members of this organization, which includes Gold Leaf Tobacco Corporation, home of Cut Rag, Folta Manufacturers, Best Tobacco Company, what's this other one here? Afroberg Tobacco Manufacturing, and Carlinomix. 6 different tobacco companies in South Africa. They have filed a court case against the government to get this sanction lifted so that cigarette sales can resume in South Africa. We'll see what happens. That's been filed in the North Gauteng Court. For those of you keeping score and paying attention, the North Gauteng Court is the same court that just a few days ago said that the Tourism Relief Fund could discriminate against minority-owned businesses, that it was not discriminatory, that it simply gave majority businesses a head start. Yeah, it beggars the imagination how that's not discrimination, but because that clearly is discrimination. But that is what happened with the North Gauteng Court, and now this case for tobacco will go before the same court. So I wouldn't hold my breath that they'll find the ability to actually adhere to or follow the law. We'll see what happens. Anyway, so when it comes to cigarettes, a lot of people are taking a look at this issue and starting polls online at places like change.org and other places. So at the polling site change.org, there are 2 polls up right now that specifically focus on this. One is called the Lift the Cigarette Ban, Sales Ban in South Africa. That one, before I went to the stream, had 35,000 signatures. It was 34,998, and it ticked over to 35,000 while I was looking at the page. 35,000 people said lift the ban. And another site called Support the National Command Council continue their ban had 24,956. So it's clearly over 25,000. So 35 and 25,000. So it sounds like people are voting relatively evenly at change.org. However, Bev McLean's poll, which she started over a month ago on lifting the ban of cigarettes in South Africa, has over 500,000 signatures of South Africans who support lifting the cigarette ban. So there you go. You got to wonder what these people are thinking about. Truly fascinating what is going on. Anyway, so my concerns about all this is the behavior of law enforcement and of political authorities around the world. It seems like an awful lot of effort is being put into expanding political control and controlling people's behavior by governments around the world. And I find that quite disturbing. Quite disturbing. The situation in which the law-abiding are being arrested and their health is put in jeopardy. Can't you simply give these people a citation? Why do you have to take them to a police station, book them around police officers who can't be bothered to wear protective masks? The same locations you take them to, or in the case of Dallas, where Miss Luther has been put in prison for running a business, a legally licensed business, because she violated an executive order. Not a law, an executive order. And now I know some attorneys will say, well, that executive order carries the weight of law under the circumstances. Okay, fine. But if you're releasing convicted felons, child molesters, rapists, and murderers from prisons in Dallas for their safety, because you're worried about they might catch it in the jail, why would you put a law-abiding citizen in jail for an infraction like this? The punishment does not fit the crime. Unless, of course, you are a angry judge who, for political reasons, takes offense to the defendant's behavior. Now, what I saw in court, she was respectful of this buffoon, and she was still punished unreasonably. She sits in jail at this hour, to my knowledge, potentially contracting COVID-19 in a Dallas jail, courtesy of an arrogant, haughty person sitting from the bench who has a guaranteed salary, who doesn't have to provide for employees, who doesn't have contract workers who work in his place of business that must feed their own children. A government civil servant, ostensibly supposed to serve the public, who has a guaranteed paycheck and benefits and suffers not one moment from this, telling private citizens who pay taxes, who obey the law, that they're selfish, and as a consequence, they must apologize. It's just judicial abuse. I see nothing else. Just shameful, 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 shameful. As was the case with the couple who were arrested because their toddler ran onto the beach and the mother went back to pick the child up. Yeah. Same thing the other day in the Western Cape. We saw the gentleman who was on the beach who had his surf paddle with him, I guess from a canoe or whatever, but he's standing there whacking it like this. And because he wasn't walking, the police harassed him and arrested him for violating the social curfew. So do you have to be moving 24/7 to be exercising? You can't stop to tie your shoe, catch your breath, stretch. You have to be walking. If you maintain your social distance, what's the problem? After all, we've been told endlessly by government officials that this is all about maintaining social distance. The world over. Maintain your social distance. You can't shake hands. You can't be near people. You can't be in contact. So what does it matter if you're out and about? If you're not near someone, particularly under lockdown regulations that have been lifted in the case of South Africa, people were allowed to exercise at that hour, which is what people were doing. It just beggars the imagination. So last week, I think it was, I called in, I was on Roman's program, Morning Shot, or it was one of his live streams, not Morning Shot, but one of his live streams. And he asked me about books that I was reading or books I might recommend on South Africa. And so he caught me off guard, and I should have mentioned this book by Yaki Cilliers. Yaki is a former South African Defense Force commissioned officer who founded the Institute for Strategic Studies based in Pretoria, which does fantastic security sector and policing research across Africa. Really great organization. He's like a senior fellow there now. He used to run it, but kind of stepped back and does a lot of writing now. Has another book that just came out. It just came out, I think it just came out. But this one's called Fate of the Nation. It's 3 scenarios for the future of South Africa. Excellent book. I can recommend it. Pretty much anything you see coming from Yaki is pretty good. I'd have to say that that while this is a fantastic book, and you can see that from the highlights, I am definitely was into reading this book. I don't think he foresaw COVID-19. I don't think anybody foresaw it. Another book which I haven't had a chance to read and I intended to get around to was this one from Tembeka. Now I can't even pretend to pronounce his surname, but I'm going to try. Kokatobi. The land is ours. This is about South Africa's first generation of black lawyers going back to the 19th century. I've never read this. I've had it for some time, and I would like to read it. So he is an advocate of the High Court of South Africa, specializing in public law, holds degrees from UNITRA and from Rhodes and the London School of Economics and Political Science. He's a research fellow at the Faculty of Law at the University of Johannesburg. So he wrote this book about South Africa's first black lawyers and the birth of constitutionalism. And much to my dismay, I've not had a chance to read it. I suppose during COVID I could probably get around to reading it at some point, but I have not done that as of yet. Anyway, for those noticing behind me, the banner on that side, this is from the Emirates Summer Series 2017, and this was a rugby match in New Jersey between the USA Eagles and the Irish national team. Ireland killed us. I got fried that day as the sun was burning my face. I sat on the side of the stadium where I got cooked by the sun. It was at a soccer stadium in Harrison, New Jersey, which is next to Newark. Anyway, that's what that banner there is. And the shirt that I'm wearing is a William Webb Ellis Cup shirt from the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan. So always continuing with my theme of rugby and promoting rugby on my website and my live streams. This is from the Women's World Cup in 2017, which took place in Ireland with games in Dublin and then the semifinals in Belfast. And so I was there for that event. This is one of the World Cups that I went to. So 2011 in New Zealand, 2015 in England, 2017 for the women in Ireland, 2018 in San Francisco for the Sevens World Cup, and then 2019 Japan for the Men's World Cup. So that's the Rugby World Cups I've been to of late, and that was actually an interesting time. Some really good games there. Wasn't happy with the final. I think it was New Zealand over England. It wasn't nearly as close as it should have been, but it was still an interesting game. Got to sit at the end of the stadium, got a good view as the tries came right in front of me there. So that's kind of where we're at with the COVID-19 situation. I hadn't really talked about COVID-19 in a while, so I thought tonight I'd just get a little live stream in to talk about it. Get a little bit of time in the air, see if anybody's interested in tuning in. I had a feeling that this would be a bad time to do a stream because it's after midnight and there aren't too many people up on the East Coast at this hour now, 1 o'clock, nearly 2 o'clock in the morning. And for South Africans who under level 4 can return to work, I imagine a lot of people by 7, 8 o'clock in the morning are getting ready or heading off to work. So I didn't expect to find too many people on here. I think the max number of viewers I've seen so far has just been a handful. So I get the impression that my initial assessment was correct. And this is not the best time to do it. But I was up and I had not really spent much time talking about COVID-19 specifically. So I thought I'd do that tonight. It seemed like a topic that probably needed to be reviewed, especially as I've become rather dismayed, as I've mentioned several times now, about the conduct of government officials. There seems to be an intentional effort to criminalize behavior of law-abiding citizens using COVID-19 as an excuse. Now that matters because in many jurisdictions, if you're convicted of a crime, depending on the severity of the crime, and who knows what someone's going to call the severity of this, they could turn this into anything. Well, you were sitting on the beach, which meant you were spreading COVID-19, which meant you had homicide in mind, or manslaughter, or whatever. Government officials can make up any crap they want to if they want to get away with it. And look what they did to Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Not a big fan of General Flynn's, but what happened to him was atrocious, and they got away with it. Only now is the truth being exposed. What happened to General Flynn here in the effort by the FBI to destroy the man in order to get the president-elect and then president. But anyway, so it's very disturbing to see what's happening. So there seems to me to be an effort here to intentionally criminalize behavior of law-abiding, tax-paying citizens so that in the future they can be easier controlled. So for instance, if you're a convicted felon, you can't own a firearm in many places. So if you're a law-abiding citizen, now you can no longer own firearms. And I think that this is part of what's going on here, intentionally or otherwise. So you're turning honest, law-abiding citizens into criminals because of capricious behavior by public authorities and law enforcement. And that is unacceptable and shameful. So by the way, on the screen there, no one's asked me, that photograph in the bottom right-hand corner is not just a random photograph. That's actually a photograph of my office at the U.S. Army War College, one small section of the wall. You can see that when I worked at the War College in my office, I kept a lot of things up. In that particular image, if you can see it, I'll actually make it bigger, shrink myself down a little bit here so that people can see it a little bit better. So let me shrink myself down and I'll zoom this up a little bit. Right, so there you go. So if you look at that, you'll see rugby banners on there, the Soccer World Cup in South Africa in the middle, Malawi, the warm heart of Africa, the Pentagon where I worked at, the Hofbräu House in Munich. And if you look in the center of the photograph to the left of the South African soccer banner, you'll see, it's hard to see, but there's a picture of me in a Springbok jersey. Let me zoom that up a little bit bigger here. And maybe now you can see it. So to the left there, you'll see a picture of me wearing a Springbok jersey in a Springbok magazine. That's the game program for a Tri-Nations or rugby championship game at Ellis Park in Johannesburg. So one of the banks was taking the pictures and imposing it on the image as if we were actually rugby players. It was kind of cool. So I enjoyed that game immensely. Unfortunately, we lost it. That's a game where Brian Habana scored 2 tries, and then he pulled his hamstring and left the game and wound up losing to the All Blacks. But it was still a great game. Anyway, that's just a snap of my office. I thought I'd put that up. I was going to try and make it the background, but I wasn't quite able to figure that out before I came on air. So anyway, I just left it down as a picture. It might be of interest to people. I'm not usually a person that puts I love me stuff all over my wall. If you'll notice there, you don't see anything that's awards or decorations or anything promoting my personal self. These are all either mementos or gifts from others from my experiences. For instance, on the right-hand side of the photograph, you'll see a photograph of the Pentagon. That's all signed by my coworkers when I worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency in the Pentagon. So they're gifts or they're reminders or mementos from places. And people ask me, why do you have so many of them on your wall? Well, that's just one tiny segment of the wall in my office that I share with my colleague. For my half of the office, virtually the entire wall space was covered, as were the tops of my bookshelves and the sides of my bookcases and desk and such. But the reason I did that is because I would have war college students who come into my office to try to ask me to be an advisor for their thesis or to ask questions about class. And so I would also I was an advisor for 4 or 5 students each year. And they would come in and we'd talk about their academic progress and their plans and their future and things like that. So I found that by hanging these things up, it sparked a lot of conversations and interest on the part of war college students, and these were great conversation starters. So that's kind of what I did. And I took all these pictures before I took everything down in my office before I retired last fall. So this is a photo from last summer, so almost a year old now. But now all this stuff sits in my basement on the floor in boxes. Don't have a wall where it's hung up at. But anyway, so that's what that's what my office looked like. Anyway, at least a part of it. So I know some people found that interesting. I don't know if viewers on here will find it interesting, but it's something that I truly enjoyed putting up, and it was a great conversation starter with my students and other faculty for that matter. Anyway, so here we are now, 2 months plus into this here in the East Coast of the United States and in South Africa, and wondering when it's going to end. So for York County, Pennsylvania, we are in lockdown until at least May 28th, despite a very low number of cases. So we'll see what happens up to that time and after that time. Already in many parts of the country, in the U.S., for instance, in Texas, the lockdown restrictions are being rescinded or at least lowered or eased, lessened for a lot of people, but that's certainly not the case here. So that's a bit frustrating for people. So it's not quite the same when you can't do things, although we must say that our lockdown restrictions are nothing like what South Africans have gone through. Absolutely draconian restrictions and control measures that have been put in place. So I had something else I wanted to read here, but now I can't seem to find it. It's about the National Command Council. Let me see if I misplaced this or something. I wanted to talk about that. So in South Africa, this entire thing is being run by a National Command Council. And people are wondering, what is this National Command Council? What is it up to? How does it run things? Who's part of it? And it's the opaque nature of it has bothered some people. And I can understand why they're concerned about it. What's the role of the legislature? Is the legislature even involved? So it's a very good question, and one that has not been adequately answered in my mind. And they don't seem to have that piece of paper. So what I'll do is I'll save that article for another discussion when I do a prepared video, and I'll talk about the National Command Council and its role in the COVID-19 crisis in South Africa, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and who they're answerable to. It is a good question. So it is a late hour here, but what I've done, and you may or may not notice it, is that the lighting is a little bit different. Now, during the daytime, I still have natural lighting coming in, but at this hour, the overhead lighting in this room is not particularly good or effective. I've left it on tonight, but last night I left it off when I did 2 prepared videos. So the lighting I've got here now is a lighting kit that I had come in. All right, well, it's been an hour, and here it is 2 o'clock in the morning, so I'm going to go ahead and close for now, and I want to thank folks for tuning in. I hope you found some utility. It was at least useful in some respect. I've made a few changes here, hoping that that what I'm doing works out a little bit better. But so let's see if we get this working here. There we go. So I want to thank you for tuning in to Indaba Africa. This has been Chris. I'll probably make a prepared video later in the day today, but this is available for those who want to watch the stream. And those who hung in there with me for this, I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. And I wish everyone in South Africa a pleasant day as you get started with your day. 8 o'clock in the morning there now. And for those here on the East Coast who are asleep, enjoy your sleep. And when you get up, here's a stream to give you a chance to look at something. So if you enjoy this, please subscribe to the channel. Toggle that little switch to get notifications. Feel free to leave comments and give me a like if you don't mind. All right, folks, thanks a lot. We'll catch you later on in Indaba Africa. You take care.